the neat thing about mountaineering is that we all get to make our own rules. We all get to go out and ski the peaks the best we can, and it's more about the enjoyment and the pursuit of, the outdoors and just getting out there and skiing. And so
all the time I had free, I would go climbing. And other people would be working for law firms in the summertime. And I was like, man, I have the rest of my life to do that. I'm going to go rock climbing. And they thought I was insane,
Backcountry Colorado, hiking, backpacking.
I did a lot of marathons. I was convinced to do some ultras.
Climbing, and I do filming and photography.
I just like the ultras because I love the community. I just think that everybody is so nice, whether they're the first place finishers or, us that kind of mosey along.
So we're sitting here live, the Dispatch Radio takeover of the Zeal Optics Explorer trailer. We're sitting with two legends in the Colorado outdoor scene. Olivia Hsu, she's a pro climber and yogi who's done a lot of really fascinating stuff, climbing around the world, taking people to treks on the Himalayas. Really excited to have you in the trailer here, Olivia. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks. Excited to be here.
And Dr. Jon Kedrowski. If anybody living in Colorado who skis doesn't know Dr. Jon, they just don't realize it. You've read about him. He's done some amazing stuff, climbing lots of Colorado peaks, skiing them, hiking them, doing a lot to kind of promote the beauty of nature out here in Colorado through your books, through your partnerships with Chris Tomer, a meteorologist here in Colorado, and John Fields, who wrote the introduction to your book. Sleeping on the Summits is the name of Dr. Jon Kedrowski's book. He grew up in Vail, and you've done a lot of amazing treks in your life here in Colorado mostly. Dr. Jon, just kick us off a little bit. Tell us a little bit about where does this drive of yours? You've summited hundreds of peaks here in Colorado. You're out there just killing it all the time. You just attempted the record for skiing all of Colorado's 14ers. What drives you? I mean, what makes you do all this?
Well, hey, thanks for having me, guys, by the way. I think what it is this sort of desire to raise the bar, inspire other people that, even on the 14ers, whether you're skiing them, hiking them, anybody can go out and do it. But then when it comes to photography, my goal was to get shots that you normally don't get to see. A lot of people climb the peaks in the morning and they see the sunrise, but I wanted to also get sunsets, I wanted to see, hey, is it possible to ski, 160 days worth of peaks, 58 peaks in 160 days? Is that possible? And push the boundaries of what is possible. And I think that can relate to people in just everyday life, is that, no one has to be ordinary, and everybody has an opportunity in our country to be successful and live a good life and to push the boundaries and make their lives better. So I think just through those projects, I try to fuel that and inspire others with them. It's kind of the goal.
And so you've got a couple of records under your book, under your belt. Can you just give our listeners a little preview of, a couple of the highlights of the things that you've done?
So the 2011, I kind of did a wacky project. Like over the years, it was sort of fun to go up and camp on the tops of mountains. And then I said, I think you could put a tent on every single one on the top and go to bed and then watch the sunset, sunrise. And I'm pretty sure no one's ever done all of them. So I thought, let's go out and do this. And had some friends join me at times, and other times I was by myself. And so that was Sleeping on the Summits, Colorado 14er High Bivvies was born. And I did it in 90 days to prepare for Everest. And when I climbed Everest in 2012, Everest expedition's 60 days. So I thought, Everest might be easier. Right, but it was similar but different in certain ways. But they let your body acclimatize to the high altitude and everything. And so, bivouac, a term which means a long night of suffering.
Right.
You don't never bivouac, but I did 58 of those bivouacs. But it wasn't all suffering, to be honest.
Olivia, do you
gorgeous.
have some bivouac experience?
Only when I've been benighted. So they're never
never
totally
a good
on purpose.
thing.
I was purposely doing it, but I'm sure this young lady, she knows all about the bivvies and having to spend the night on the ledge probably.
No, for sure. I've dug out a few, just because of bad weather and, the mountains are so unpredictable sometimes. So.
And Dr. John, so and this year earlier you attempted another record. Take us through that. I know there's a little bit of nuance here that actually I think is a little illuminating for the. Oh, are you? I think it's a little bit of illuminating for the kind of world that we live in. You know, we're Dispatch Radio. We talk outdoor adventure life all the time. You know, we have a kind of core audience of people that are out there getting it. That take some folks take a little maybe too seriously the fastest known times and technicalities, whereas the rest of us are just really inspired by folks getting up and tapping peaks. And I just thought this story from 2016 kind of touches on a little bit about that. So just tell us a little bit, what was the attempt that you were making this year?
Well, several years ago, I mean, over the years I've skied like 45 of the 14ers, and there was a few I hadn't been to yet to ski that I always wanted to. And so part of the goal with this new project was to go out and say, well, hey, I think all these peaks can be skied in one season, one spring season, or starting in January till as long as the snow sticks around. And kind of thought if I did a few in January and February and March, it would put me in the position to maybe get a chance to ski every peak by June. And this year, sure enough, in Colorado, we had really good snow. We had about 4 feet of snow dumped from late April to early May, and its conditions were unbelievable up high. And so kind of took advantage of that and was able to at least get out on every single peak and ski them. And, there's a few people in the ski community that are still criticizing it and saying, well, you didn't ski the peaks. And kind of what I say to that as well, the neat thing about mountaineering is that we all get to make our own rules. We all get to go out and ski the peaks the best we can. And it's more about the enjoyment and the pursuit of, the outdoors and just getting out there and skiing. And so,
and it was Capitol Peak that hung you up.
Yeah, so last year in 2015, on June 4th, I skied Capitol Peak cleanly. And at that time, I thought about this idea and said, well, maybe if I go out, I could do them all. And the neat thing about that was last summer, the snow was really good in June last year in 2015. So Capitol and Snowmass, which were my last two peaks, I did those last year in June. And so when I was able to go around the calendar starting in January, there was actually a 364-day period where I skied all the 14ers leading up to then leaving to get it within 160 days, Capitol and Snowmass again. And then I went back out and did Snowmass and Capitol once again in June, but they weren't as skiable as they had been in the past. So some people, there's purists that say, well, if you don't leave your skis on from the summit to the trailhead, it doesn't count. And kind of what I say to that is like, well, even if I had to take my skis off for 75 feet to climb down a cliff band, I clicked back in and still skied 3,000 vertical. So I certainly didn't walk down. And I still was able to ski every single peak. And actually, besides those two peaks, there's a couple others that have a few questions, but like 54 of the 58 were done by complete ski descents, which I still look at and say, wow, that was really fun. Yeah. And that's kind of where I'm at with that. And yeah, so it was an amazing, fun project. I really enjoyed it.
And Olivia, this is you're in a little bit. It's a similar world, but it's much different as well. So you were a pro climber before. You're also a yogi. Tell us a little bit about your background. I know our listeners are just kind of getting to know you. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm a professional rock climber. I started off climbing over 17, maybe almost 20 years ago. You kind of forget. The years kind of just pass by. And I started yoga because I had a climbing injury because I was a totally obsessed rock climber. And so I instantly fell in love with climbing, and I found this wonderful balance between climbing and yoga. So I basically travel the world and I climb and I teach yoga. So sometimes I teach yoga to climbers or I teach climbing to yoga people.
And despite the different, and so Dr. John is out there in the wintertime a lot of times, ski mountaineering, but it sounds like a lot of common threads between this. Is it too far to say an addiction to the outdoors?
I think he probably chases the snow and I chase the good climbing temperatures.
Right.
Tank top climbing,
yeah.
right? Yeah. Which
Although,
I love, too.
When I am in Colorado in the wintertime, I do go up to Vail, where John's from, and I go ice climbing.
We'll have to get out and do that.
Yeah, for sure.
Definitely. Show me the fang.
Do you rock climb also, Dr. John?
Yeah, not as much as I should. We were kind of talking before the show, and I said, well, I don't really crag ever, but if there's I've done like Capitol Peak, the Northwest Buttress, which is not the knife edge route, and it's a 5, 10, 13 pitches, so I'll go out and do something like that. But
Yes,
we were
that
talking, we
okay.
gotta get out and
Dispatch
do
Nation,
this.
that is officially climbing.
I guess, but I mean, that being
Yes, you do
said,
climb.
sometimes I don't do as much. And when I was guiding in Vail, it was more like, okay, if they said, hey, we have a client that wants to ice climb, or we have a client that wants to go ski, I would choose skiing so I wouldn't have to freeze my butt off all day belaying them.
Yeah.
But but we could go do the Fang. That sounds like fun. You probably show me that.
Let's do it.
I could learn a lot from you, I'm sure.
And one thing that you both have in common is a love for big mountains, and you've both been to the Himalaya. Olivia, tell us a little bit about, I know you do some trekking out there and you do
Yeah.
some yoga retreats. Tell us
Yeah.
how that started and kind of your connection.
Well, so I traveled out to the Khumbu several times, to the Mustang, to Nuptse and Everest base camps. And at that time, my partner was climbing, and I was traveling with him. So I would spend a couple weeks at a time. And because I'm a yogi, I would always be practicing the whole time. And I was like, oh, this is such an amazing way to experience, the Khumbu, these amazing mountains. And so that's kind of where the idea of trekking and doing yoga in the Himalaya kind of came from.
And so what do you take groups out there?
Yeah. So I have one, I'm trying to organize one for May or May-June this year.
That seems like a natural fit with the region, given the religious,
For sure.
Buddhists and the peacefulness that the Nepali people have doing these
Definitely.
retreats. It sounds like a lot of fun. Actually.
Olivia, I've been wanting to ask you this because you said something in a podcast that I listened to that you have done prior. And
Running on Om.com.
Running on Om, yeah. It was really great.
Great podcast. We love them.
You were talking about like the ego and the drive in climbing and balancing the ego with your drive. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, for
Do
sure.
you remember that?
Because I think, for people to achieve things, you have to have an ego. We all have an ego, but it's a matter of keeping that in check, not letting that ego run off.
And surrounding yourself by people with similar egos, though, can actually help balance it out, I think, and help promote something good.
Yeah, and I think, through my yoga practice and practicing yoga, it's a real check-in, to yourself and where you're at with that.
Yeah, like why are you pushing yourself and how hard are you pushing yourself and what for?
Yes.
And checking in with that.
Definitely.
And using other people's egos or being in the same balance so that they push you to go harder.
Yeah, and in mountaineering, like we were saying at the top of the show, is like, it's a hard sport because there's literally no rules, right? I mean, it's people do it for different reasons, and you can set your own standards. But that's the beauty of it, because then anybody can do it. The average person here in Denver, Colorado, or the elite professional climber, they can all do it in their own way and still enjoy it, and that's great and it's much different. Like I played basketball in college at Division I level, and it was always so competitive. And then, that's your measuring stick, is playing against somebody. When you go mountaineering, you're not playing against anybody except for the mountain, against the route you're playing, and against yourself, which is at times can be more fulfilling. I think.
It doesn't matter, like what you were saying earlier, what people are saying about what you're doing. It's your own path and your own route.
Yeah, it's your own
passion.
own experience.
Yeah, and people are having all these judgments, and you're like, well, this is what I'm doing.
Yeah, and that's kind of the beauty of it. It's probably easier. I mean, I've seen it in both levels: criticism in college basketball versus criticism in the mountaineering world. It's totally two different things, because it's not a competitive, really. I mean, people make it competitive, don't get me wrong, but I think you can set your own standards and create your own goals, right?
For sure.
So.
And Dr. Jon, you climbed Everest as well. What did you find from that experience? Was it everything you thought it was going to be?
In some ways, it was the easiest thing I've ever done, and in some ways, it was the hardest thing I've ever done. And there's just so much that goes into it. I mean, because it's a long journey.
Easy,
and it's
easy
really high.
because
I've been on a lot of expeditions where we go in a small team and we carry a lot of our own gear. But then when you're there, the Sherpa
You were
community helps, and all the expeditions, there's a lot of help. So in some ways that made it easier. But then the altitude's really high, and that's really hard. So there's a lot that goes into the dynamics of an Everest expedition that's different than any other place you go, just because it's the highest mountain
I
in
would
the
almost
world.
put Everest in a whole nother category of like climbing than anything else, because there's a whole industry built around it. And there's certain objective hazards that if you were climbing any other mountain in the world, you wouldn't put yourself in. But because it's Everest, people go through the ice fall. And normally that would be something that people would avoid.
Yeah, and also in some ways, climbing a big rock wall objective for you, like on the diamond you're talking about, in some ways, there's Everest climbers of today that couldn't do what she does on that wall, to be quite honest. So, kudos
that's
to
for
you
sure.
and the technical climbing you do, because, Everest in some ways, that's why Everest is easier, though. So, but yeah, it's an interesting topic. You could have like a whole show
I know.
on that.
you could write a whole book.
So stayed away from the books because so many books have been written about Everest, but yeah.
Olivia, we were talking a little earlier about your family being back in Hong Kong, and you do get back there by teaching yoga, and how that's interesting that you kind of design your life around kind of what you feel is important. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Well, I actually did a trip to China in December with some girlfriends of mine. So for a long time, I'd been telling them about Hong Kong and how I kind of grew up there. I did high school there. But I was born in the States, and my dad got a job, a teaching position actually at the university there. So we moved there. And so they had always wanted to come to Hong Kong. And there's actually climbing in Hong Kong. And whenever I go back to visit them, I go climbing. And so we did a trip into China to kind of a newer climbing area, which was awesome because, there's some places in the world you can go and you can just meet climbing partners. And I had done that for a long time where I would travel to Seiyus by myself because I wanted to climb and I didn't have climbing partners who could go with me. And I was like, I'm a capable climber and I can find someone to belay me kind of thing. So they came with me to this more remote area, and we kind of explored the climbing areas in China and Hong Kong, and they were really excited to see where I kind of grew up. But over the years, through yoga, it's given me the opportunity to also travel, and so I actually go to Hong Kong a couple of times a year and teach there.
That's awesome. I have parents on the East Coast, and it's hard enough to visit them, so I can only imagine. I want to talk a little bit about what's coming up for both of you. Olivia, I know you've got a couple of exciting things coming up.
Yeah, I actually go to LA tomorrow, and I film with a company called Yoga Glow, and I'm designing a Yoga for Climbers series with them. And then after that, I'm back here in Colorado, and I'm teaching for Zeal Optics, actually, at the Adventure Film Festival, just a free yoga class for that weekend. And then in November, I'll be teaching a climbing clinic at, oops, did that just stop? Okay, climbing clinic at the Bishop Highballer for the American Alpine Club.
Awesome. And Dr. Jon, you just went through a big expedition, tagging all those 14ers. I think a normal human being would just say, hey, I'm going to relax for a few years. That was a nice big effort. But I imagine that's not the case with you.
Well, I mean, this fall's been nice to be out in the sunshine, and I'm going to take up yoga, I think.
Nice.
Maybe you can help me out with that. And then I have some clients set up for a trip to Antarctica. I never really envisioned having a chance to climb the 7 summits, and I've done 5 of them. And so I have Australia left, and then Vincent Massif in Antarctica. So that's kind of the goal for January coming up. And kind of between now and then, I'm editing a 3rd book, which is a guidebook to skiing here in Colorado. So it's similar to my 2nd book, The Skiing and Sleeping on the Summits, where there's some guidebook maps and things in it, but it's all Colorado. And then at some point, I've got another sort of project for next year that I'm pitching and talking with my sponsors now
He's got
about.
that look in his eye
The
that
fall-
he's
the
got
fall
something
is
really
always-
good cooking
The
up.
fall is always the time that you sort of talk with your supporters and say, hey, this is what I want to do. And so we've sort of started turning the wheel since Outdoor Retailer. And then it's been sort of about planting the seed and talking more about it. And then by about November, I'll know if it's a yay or nay with that. And that'll be probably starting in about June May, June, July next year.
So I'm sure a lot of our listeners don't understand your world. They see this guy that and for you too, Olivia. They just see you go out having these amazing adventures, and they don't understand they're working a 9 to 5. Like, how do these people get to do this? There's a lot more hustle involved in what you're doing than people realize. I imagine there's a lot of hard work that's behind the scenes. That's not just the Instagram photo of you on a rock wall or you at the summit. But that's interesting that you mentioned that, Dr. Jon. That's just kind of the putting together the pieces of working with partners, trying to put something together. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these projects are passion to start, but then it's like, well, okay, how can this either benefit others or what's in it for a sponsor? And I always try to make my partnerships a true partnership where they can sort of lay out what they want, and then I can say, well, this cool project will get you this sort of visibility, but then, product testing can be involved. There's so many things you can do with a sponsor and with a company, and even Zeal's a great supporter of the things I do, and so you kind of lay the groundwork with that, and then I suppose it sort of helps if you've written a book or have done a cool project, right? Then you can go and talk to somebody, and they know that you've been able to do this stuff. So I just kind of tell people, start small, but pursue your passion. And I've never been much of a 9 to 5-er. Some days I'm 10 to 2. Some days I'm 6 to 10 p.m., 6 a.m. to 10 p.m.,
Yeah.
as you understand
I
that.
mean, it's actually kind of funny because I think when you do what we do, people think, okay, well, I have this 9 to 5 job. I think we have like a 24-hour, all year round kind of job. And I actually went to law school. And so if it was about making money, I would just be a lawyer, But for me, I wasn't really passionate about pursuing that. And it was kind of funny because when I was in law school, all the time I had free, I would go climbing. And other people would be working for law firms in the summertime. And I was like, man, I have the rest of my life to do that. I'm going to go rock climbing. And they thought I was insane, And
What about your parents?
Pardon?
What about your folks?
Oh, I have Asian parents. I have a
They
tiger
wanted a
mom.
doctor or a lawyer.
Exactly. And I think it was maybe last year or a couple years ago, my dad finally was like, so I guess you're not going to give up rock climbing, huh? I mean, every time I would go back, they would be like, so when are you going to stop climbing? And maybe you should start playing golf or something.
Which I do play a lot of golf in the off season. Like right now, I go up to my parents' place in Cordillera, grab my dad when he's. I think I get my work ethic from my parents because they'll never retire.
Are they worried about the safety?
No, they just want a doctor or a...
Not anymore.
At one point, maybe because my dad's actually really afraid of heights, so the thought of me climbing actually would raise his heart rate. And one time I went home and he had this heart rate monitor, and he said, "Look, watch. I'm thinking about you climbing," and the heart, it would go up. And I was like, oh, way to guilt trip me.
Wow.
And one
a good
time
one,
I was
Dad.
on the cover of Rock and Ice, and I was almost like, should I show this to my parents? I don't know. My dad might have a heart attack,
But once they start seeing cool stuff, then they're like, oh, well, that's just what you do.
Yeah. And
That's kind of what my parents say.
and
Is
I
that
think
the same
they
for you,
kind of
Dr.
come
Jon?
to accept it.
Yeah, I mean, my mom's just kind of like, oh, he's in the middle of this thing again,
So if you weren't a whatever explorer, mountaineer, author by trade, would you be a meteorologist? Would you be Chris Tomer? Would he be out of a job?
It could have been an opportunity, but a professor, my best advice I got from my former boss is he says to me, professors are old. You can be a professor when you're old. So he's like, go out and do all this cool stuff and write your books and do your, some film things and just enjoy life. And you can always come back to teaching. And in fact, every fall to give me that office space, I work with Colorado Mountain College up in Vail, and I teach 2 courses on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And that way I get to interact with the students. I get office space to plan my next endeavor and or edit my next book. And so it gives me a little bit of balance from September to Christmas. And then the rest of the year I'm out doing what I love.
And is it safe to say the secret mission is going to be some sort of ski mountaineering?
There's a couple of options. I'll just leave it at that.
We're trying to break news here on Dispatch Radio. Well, it's been really great to have both of you. Excited to have both of you back on the show, get to know more about you. Let's wrap up by just telling us how our listeners can find you.
You could go to my website, oliviahsu.com.
And spell that for us.
OLIVIAHSU. And also like through Zeal and Prana and 510 Sterling and Petzl.
Right on.
Awesome. I'm just JonKedrowski.com, JonKedrowski.com. The website's actually in development because my old website we turned it off. It was just getting too bad. I had to create something new. And then 14erskirecord.com, and then it's DrJonKedski. So that's Dr. Jon Kedrowski. That's for Twitter.
That's not confusing at all for our millennials.
Twitter and Instagram, Dr. Jon Kedrowski.
And we definitely want to recommend the book for our listeners. Dr. John, will you just tell us what books are out that folks can buy?
The new book just came out in March called Skiing and Sleeping on the Summits. It's Cascade Volcanoes of the Pacific Northwest. Sort of chronicles camping on the summits of all the volcanoes and skiing them and having a good time. And then the original, this is a sequel to the original, Sleeping on the Summits, Colorado 14er High Bivvies, about the Colorado 58 14ers. And it's kind of been a blessing with that book. I never thought it would keep selling like it has. And it's got some really fun photos for everybody that's a 14er enthusiast.
Well, guys, thanks so much for stopping by the Zeal Explorer to talk with us, and we look forward to talking with you again.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.